Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Those of you who are roughly my age will remember a thing called Skylab. Skylab was something we put into orbit and spent some time on, and then eventually we got bored with it and we decided to leave it up there and let nature take its course. By nature, I mean gravity. And as they say, what goes up must come down. And so I remember when there was like the news and a Skylab watch. You know, Skylab is in orbital decay. Where might it land? And they can track this stuff and kind of figure out roughly. And so I remember at one point in time they were speculating, it might hit the Indian Ocean. Oh no, it might hit Australia. Oh no. And eventually it did come down. But here's a story. A lot of people sent this to me. Thank you very much. And I got the version here from Scientific American, and Stephen with a PH sent me a note last night about it, but so did a lot of other people. Will NASA pay damages for space junk that crashed into Florida home? Now, this is not Skylab, because this has happened more recently, but the Florida family has filed a claim with the government against NASA to compensate them after space debris crashed through their home in March. And more interestingly, somebody's identified what it is that crashed through their house and where it came from. And Josh Dinner and Space.com published this originally. The growing problem of space debris, which is, something I lay awake at night about, isn't just one that plagues Earth's orbit. Several instances of space trash crashing back down to Earth have made recent headlines, and a family is requesting that NASA pay for the damages to their home. The space agency got the claim from the family after a chunk of space junk crashed through their home in Naples, Florida. The incident occurred in March as debris tore through the roof and 2 floors of the family home. Now, it nearly hit his son, but didn't. And it had originally posted about this on X, or Twitter, as we called it in the old days. NASA has since confirmed that the debris came from a 2.9-ton pallet of used batteries jettisoned from the International Space Station back in March of 2021. So the stuff apparently was orbiting for a while before it came through and landed. The structure was expected to burn up completely in the Earth's atmosphere, but apparently didn't. So there's speculation following the incident. The man who owned the home voiced his expectation that the responsible parties should be held accountable. We're grateful that no one sustained physical injury, but a near-miss situation such as this could have been catastrophic. Now, there's a law firm representing the family, and they point out that under the Space Liability Convention, NASA would be liable had the debris caused damage in another country, and thinks that the policy should apply within the U.S. as well. We've asked NASA not to apply a different standard towards U.S. citizens or residents, but instead to take care of this family and make them whole, the attorney wrote. And so what they're saying is there is a convention that some countries have signed up with. It says, look, if something gets put up into space and comes crashing back down and it causes damage in another country than your own, you'll take care of it. Because the presumption, I think, is that you'll take care of your own people. So if you put it up in space and it crashes in some other country, you can't go, that ain't us, we're not going to pay for it. No, you have to pay for it. But now it looks like you'd have to look someplace else for help, because the Space Liability Convention doesn't force you to pay people in your own country. The incident has the potential to set a precedent for governments and private space companies in terms of how compensation could be handled for victims of similar incidents in the future. Though their damage was less severe than that caused at the home here, several other reports of crashing space debris have occurred in the past year, including portions of SpaceX Dragon trunk found in Canada and North Carolina, and a piece of an Indian Space Research Organization rocket landing on a beach in Australia. Here, the U.S. government, through NASA, has an opportunity to set the standard or set a precedent as to what responsible, safe, and sustainable space operations ought to look like. If NASA were to take the position that this claim should be paid in full, it would send a strong signal to both other governments and private industries that such victims should be compensated regardless of fault. And it's interesting because regardless of fault, it's hard to imagine as anybody else's fault other than the person who put that thing up there. But what they're pointing out here is that quite often, to recover money in a lawsuit, you must prove certain things. And now there is a concept, res ipsa loquitur. And I've got a license plate someone sent me from Illinois, and it says res ipsa on it. And that's the first two words of that three-word Latin phrase. And res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. When people ask, what does that mean? It means that sometimes what you see is what you get. What happened here? Take a look and figure it out. That's what happened here. And so now there are situations where you must prove somebody was negligent, okay? So let's suppose you're walking down the street and you go blank and you wake up in a hospital. That's kind of weird. Just a second ago, it seems, I was walking down the street. And now here I am in a hospital. What's going on? And your loved ones gathering around you who are all happy that you've opened your eyes and started talking go, oh, they found you pinned beneath a piano that fell off the 18th floor of a skyscraper. And through some miracle of happenstance, you survived. Now, here's the thing. There are no witnesses who've come forward. It's simply that a piano fell off the 18th floor of a skyscraper directly over your head and landed on you, and you survived. How do you prove that somebody was negligent? Because you didn't see it happen. Well, res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. Is there any fact pattern that you can come up with where it wouldn't be negligence for a piano to fall from the 18th floor of a skyscraper? And this is a hypothetical, so don't start arguing with me about whether or not you could survive that. That's not the point. The point is that there are some things that we know who to blame, and you shouldn't force the victim to find out a way to prove it when it's so painfully obvious. So a piece of space junk falling from up there, and we know who's the one who pushed it off the whatever they're up there on and put it into its orbital decay. We know who they were. We know what it was. And yes, they're playing a form of roulette by doing that because they know that the odds are it won't hit anybody, but it might. So in this example, space junk hits this guy's house and we know what it was. It came from a pallet of batteries. Who should pay for that? Should he pay for that? Maybe he shouldn't have put his house there. No, that's silly. Maybe the people who pushed it off up there, hoping it would burn up, maybe they should be held liable. Now, you'll notice there's a distinction because there are now private companies putting things into space. What we're talking about here, though, is a governmental entity. And remember that to sue the government, you usually need permission to do it. And that's from sovereign immunity. And the sovereign immunity comes from the fact that the government is running things, and they've always said that for us to be a defendant in a lawsuit, generally speaking, you need our permission to sue us. And I know a lot of people, when they hear that, they go, really? Well, no, understand that you hear about them being sued all the time. And so there are laws in place that allow you to sue for all of the obvious stuff. But it just turns out that there's not a law in place right now yet saying that, oh, by the way, you can also sue us if some of our space junk hits you when you're walking about on the surface of the planet. So what they need to do is one of two things. NASA might be able to, on their own, step up and say, it was our space junk, we'll pay for it. They'd probably need authority to do that. And I guess they'd probably have to go to Congress and get that authority. On the other hand, the government could work out how to get it made so you can sue for this. But again, that would take congressional authority to start with and then get passed and so on and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see. This might be the first example we have of somebody who's filing a legal claim against the government for falling space junk hitting in America causing harm to Americans, and it's our space agency that put the junk up there and then, in essence, pushed it back down. So it's a crazy thing. But, we've been discussing space junk for quite some time. And I remember reading articles back in the 80s, 90s about how many things are in space now. And, of course, if you look at how the planet works and how space works and so on, once you start putting stuff in orbit way out here, it seems like the odds of that stuff causing any trouble or hitting each other or anything like that, it would seem to be highly unlikely. But, of course, it's going to happen once in a while. So I hope they take care of this family. I'm just not sure how they're going to do it, whether it's going to be NASA stepping up and going, hey, look, we can take care of that. That's our problem. Or whether they need authority to do that. Or if it's going to take Congress to pass a law that says, yeah, if you get hit by space junk. Because here's the real problem. How often does this happen? Well, this is, like I said, the first time I've heard of this happening at this scale. They point out there's a couple other examples of it happening in North Carolina, but also Canada, which is not that far away, at least not to me here in Michigan. And so it's one of those things where it's such a rare occurrence that you wonder, will they go, hey, we need to pass a law on this. There's one person who's affected or two people who are affected. So that's, I think, the most difficult part here is that other than an outcry of a lot of people saying that's not fair, it really only affects a small number of people. But I hope they take care of this. And it's something we knew was coming. So here we are. So Stephen with the PH and everybody else, thank you for sending it from the Scientific American. And Josh Dinner wrote that. Will NASA pay damages for space junk that crashed into a Florida home? But nobody's hurt. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Wherever you are, it's the place you need to be.